gentlemen, welcome. We've been having amazing sessions here thanks to iGlobal. So this session is about investing in the Indian stock markets. Indian stock markets, as you know, has been booming. So we would all love to know how to invest in shares in India, what are the formalities, and what are the opportunities. I'm joined here today by two gentlemen from Edelweiss, Edelweiss Private Wealth Management, Mr. Sahil Kapoor, the Chief Market Strategist, and Mr. Chandresh Mehta, Senior Vice President and the Practice Head. So to get straight into it, Sahil, if I can start with you, can India actually drive global growth?
Thank you, Mr. Kapadia, for inviting us. So, see, India is one of the largest economies right now globally. If you have the pecking order done, India is probably the fastest growing economy, even in 2020, where the global pandemic has sort of derailed the growth globally. India did see a big decline in growth, but I think last 2 quarters it's been accelerating upwards. So if you look at 2-3 years down the line, India will probably have 2-3 big great factors. First is a very very strong demography. Overall, Indian average population is just about 28 years of age. Working age population is very very young. That is something which is not present in most of the countries in the world. Very very few countries are seeing their age coming down. It's actually going up for most of the countries in the world, and this will remain with India for about 37 years from today. So I think it's a very very long period of good strong demographic dividend for India. Secondly, our nominal growth numbers have been inching up ever since we bottomed out last year, and now they're looking very very promising. We should be clocking upwards of 15-16% growth nominally in 2021, which I think will be the fastest among the large 40 nations.
That's fantastic news. One question I had further to that is the Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been talking about Make in India and manufacturing in India. Do you believe that Indian manufacturing is the next big sector in India now?
So there are two parts. One is, if you go back in history about 40-50 years ago, what Japan abandoned, China took up as a manufacturing power. And slowly and steadily, China has been abandoning a lot of sectors, a lot of areas where it did a lot of exports. And at the same time, India has been picking up very, very well. It's been, the latest PLI scheme, which the government of India announced. It gives a huge impetus for manufacturing in India. Land labor reforms have been going on at a breakneck pace. Ease of doing business ranking has improved by about 50 places for India over the last 5 years, which is, I think, one of the fastest pace in the world. And one of the most important aspect, our cost of borrowing has gone down significantly, which was a big problem area. And the reforms that you already know, GST, RERA, and whole host of reforms at the state levels. All of this clearly illustrates that India is probably going to become a good, strong manufacturing hub over the years. There are certain sectors like electronics, which is coming up. Textile has been a good, strong backbone for India ever since. And automobiles and auto ancillary is something that India has done very well over the last 30 years. So I think these sectors particularly are doing very well. In addition to this, specialty chemicals and chemicals is another sector which is most likely to do very well over the next 10 years. So I think there are 3-4 sectors which can probably accelerate India's manufacturing growth story. And I think it is for real.
You mentioned India's growth story. I just wanted to understand what is the actual fabric which holds the whole Indian growth story together? What do you believe are the forces behind it?
So largely, I think we have 4 strong forces. First, I already spoke about the demography. I think it's very, very supportive. Second, I think, is the debt profile. India is probably one of the least indebted nations among all the 40 large nations. Although our numbers look optically higher at 80-85% of overall debt. But if you look at the private sector debt, it is just about 40%. So, for example, if you compare, let's say, China to India, China has got about 330% debt to GDP. And India is just 120, 123%. So there is a long way to leverage up in terms of economy. Thirdly, I think in terms of competition, India is really picking up pace. It was only about software exports earlier. Now I think it is picking up pace in the sectors I just spoke about, chemicals, textiles, and all the other sectors which I spoke about. Third is the overall globalization factor in India. No, India is not a closed nation. I think it is just open. And with the help of such a huge diaspora globally, I think India is much more connected. And that drives a lot of growth for India. So these factors, I think, are good, strong contributory factors. And they are here to stay. And one new factor which has got added, Indian government, the central government and the Indian central bank, both have gone together and started acting in coordination, which was, I think, absent for at least last 1 decade. So this is the big change which has happened, and this will probably drive growth in India, and the Indian growth story should become even stronger.
That's great news. So in terms of investments from offshore, how vibrant and how welcoming is the Indian landscape for the investors?
All right. See, one of the key features lately has been Indian government has been bringing down taxes for foreign investors, and the whole host of new instruments and products which has come up. I think that creates a good, strong base for foreign investors to come in. And over the last, I think, 3 to 5 years, a lot of new instruments like InvITs and other new instruments have got listed, which really provides much better returns in comparison to the old legacy instruments that we had. And secondly, I think it's been a more stable regime over the last 2, 3 years. If you would have seen the budget 2021, it was kind of a very, very welcome change in terms of taxation, in terms of what it did for markets at home and for global investors. So we think this trend will continue. Probably government is going to, keep a very strong and close eye on how it taxes foreign money, which is coming into India, and that will be quite helpful for the foreign investor.
Fantastic. That's great. I'll move to Chandresh to ask, taking a cue from what Sai was saying. How easy is it for investors to access the Indian equity markets?
So thanks a lot, Mr. Kapadia, and thanks everyone for giving us the opportunity to come and talk about, how to access Indian markets. If you really see, it's very, very simple actually for NRIs or investors who are from Indian origin. Simply, there are two ways. One is to access Indian markets is through UCITS sort of opportunity wherein, there are these funds which are set up out of either Mauritius or Cayman Islands, which basically directly invest into Indian stocks. If you see the landscape over the last couple of years, there are probably more than 35 odd funds, which would have given a CAGR return of anywhere between 20 to 60%. This just draws down from one thing, which is that, last 1 year has been a blockbuster year for India. So just to give you some data, last 1 year from a large cap perspective would have been garnered around 69% versus 5-year CAGR return at around 13 odd percent. If you look at mid caps, would have done around 105% in the last 1 year versus almost 13%, same for the last 5 year. And if you look at small caps, it's around 10% for the last 5 year versus 129% for the last 1 year. So idea is that if we can really garner, I think the basic premise, which I've heard from earlier sessions also from the same webinars is one needs to be disciplined. And considering India is an emerging market, one needs to be invested in India for at least 3 to 5 years. So one, I told you that is from UCITS. The other one is if the investor is an NRI who has a PAN card and an Aadhaar card, which is very simple to get. Once you have that, you have access to Indian markets in the forms of mutual funds, in terms of solutions like straight equity, futures and options as well. So very, very easy to access.
Okay, that's good. Are there any specific emerging ideas or investment classes that you would like to encourage people to look at and talk about?
So, taking a lead from what Sahil was talking about, and, there was a session prior to this session which talked about real estate. I personally am a very big fan of real estate myself as well. I personally think that, newer asset classes in India, which is like InvITs and REITs. When I say InvIT, it's basically infrastructure investment trusts. And when I say REIT, it's real estate investment trust. These are two asset classes which have been there in developed economies for a very long time. But these are really new for India because they've come in into play over the last only couple of years. In these sort of asset classes, one can garner anywhere between 7 to 10% returns on INR terms, which can come down to almost 4 to 6% in dollar terms, considering a depreciation of 3 to 4%. The best part about these assets are these are fully liquid. When I say this is fully liquid, these are tradable on the exchange. You can buy today and you can sell tomorrow. And, the yields have been fantastic. One of the InvIT opportunities, it is backed by government cash flows. So there are power transmission assets where there is government cash flows. On a stock price of around 130 odd rupees, it gives you a dividend per unit of around 12 rupees, which is very, very sweet. On the real estate side, there are three players who have come into the market. It is Embassy, Mindspace, and Brookfields, which gives you anywhere between 7 to 9% return. The good part about REITs is that, more than these returns, which is either in form of dividend or interest, this can get you some capital appreciation as well over a period of time. So to get 3 to 5% capital appreciation over the next 3 years, I wouldn't really say that this is not possible.
Fantastic. In terms of the actual, apart from these instruments, in terms of the equity markets, we also understand that now there are several ETFs floated and promoted by local exchanges as well as other mutual funds. Would you recommend any of those?
So see, I think when it comes to large cap investing, a lot of times I would say it becomes very easy to get access through ETFs. First of all, they are very low cost. Secondly, what happens is that, there are some limitations for a mutual fund or, any other PMSs when, a sector weight of a specific stock goes up about 10%, it becomes very, very difficult for them to beat the benchmark. So, at that point of time, if you see a lot of times, large cap mutual funds might not do justice to your portfolio. So yeah, mid cap and small cap, there are PMSs, there are alternative investment funds, there is mutual funds which can garner good returns for you. But for large cap, definitely there are some ETFs which can be, looked upon. And there are many of those. So there is ETFs from all across the mutual fund industry. Sahil, feel free to add in case if you think.
I think one interesting aspect in terms of ETF is the new debt investing which has come up in India, because there is a global search for yields. For example, the Bharat Bond ETF, which is purely driven by public sector enterprise companies, which is like quasi-sovereign ETF. It provides really, really good yield. I think at 660, 670%. It's a very strong contender. And now the new ETF which are coming up in terms of not only getting Government of India bonds, but also the state bonds, SDLs they are called in India. And they provide a good, strong 40 to 50 basis points return, higher than the GSEC. So I think these are, on the debt side, some ETFs which are extremely juicy as an opportunity at this time.
Mir, the basic premise remains is that, currently at tax freeze at 4.5%. And, if you can get ETFs where you can get indexation benefits for locals, these tends to give you a return of anywhere between 5.75% to 6.25%. So this is an alpha of almost 150 to 175 bips, which you can garner with the same risk. When I say it's the same risk, it's basically the same paper. It is REC, PFC, whatever you can think of, Power Grid. That is usually the tax free is what people used to hold, right? So effectively, if you're getting same yield, if you're getting an alpha of 150 basis points with the similar pedigree or credit risk, I would strongly go for these sort of papers from a longer tenor debt holdings as well.
Okay, and finally, if I may ask, what is your view on the Indian rupee going forward? If Sahil can answer that.
Largely, I think it stems from the amount of FX reserve that RBI has built over time. Last 12 months, RBI has garnered about $104 billion in terms of FX. And India has got about $582 billion of FX reserves now. And in net terms, India is now a net creditor nation. It has borrowed money to the world, which is unlike what has happened in last 20, 30 years. So that gives a lot of cushion to the rupee. It appears to be quite stable. I think more stable than we've seen it over the last 10, 20 years. Our hypothesis right now is that our inflation is going to remain under control with RBI having such a large, strong kitty in terms of FX reserve and our external situation also remaining very, very stable. Rupee most likely is going to trade between, let's say, 72 half on against the dollar, and on the upside, it probably can go to 75 or so. That should be the range for at least many quarters from now. So you could say that rupee is going to be much, much stable in the next, let's say, 4 or 8 quarters than it has been over a period of time.
Fantastic. Thank you, gentlemen. I think you guys have given amazing insights into the vibrant economy that is India, and of course on the Indian rupee and various instruments. I really appreciate. I'm sure all the audience is appreciating your inputs, and that's all from our session here. And it's back to the studios. Thank you.
Thank you.